actually speak public communication is not okay.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to this debate. And I now invite the first speaker of the affirming team to present their team's case. We live in an age of misinformation being spread rampantly across the globe, being spread by major political figures in places such as the United States, and we do not stand for this. Our path to victory will be by proving that how, through banning AI, we will give students the ability to maintain the skills necessary for to their lives, especially in an age of information and misinformation. My first thing, I'll introduce my model and give some characterization, as well as explain AI slightly, just so we're on the same page. Then I will go on to my first point about why we will, how banning AI will aid students' critical thinking, and my second point will be about how banning it will improve learning outcomes. So first, what is an AI? An AI, in this case, like ChatGPT, generally draws upon information that is already publicly available to make its own sort of like amalgamation of it. It doesn't come up with new ideas. It does not invent stuff. It simply restates stuff in a different way. It manipulates the things that are already out there. Now, allow me to give a model. Teachers will see your work for things such as internals and their equivalent across the world, so allowing you to work on it after they've seen it. So they'll obviously be able to tell if you've gone home over the weekend and pushed out 12 paragraphs for your historical essay that you probably may not have done it yourself. Then they can check it with past writing to see if you have like changed style dramatically. They can also just use an AI checker itself to see if like you have written it using an AI in the first place. Externals, realistically, you can't really cheat using ChatGPT during them and other AIs, so they won't really be affected in the first place. And we say that partial regulation doesn't work because you still don't get to start thinking for yourself. You don't come up with those ideas that you need to, that we are saying is so important for things like essays and whatnot, that show you actually understand the content provided. Now, to characterize students, we say that students primarily go to school to learn literal knowledge, to learn to communicate their ideas, and to learn to analyze the world around them without unnecessarily burdening themselves by taking the hardest path available. So we say that under a status quo, they would use this AI, whilst under our system, they would not. Now for my first point on why banning AI will actually help teach analytical skills. For some context, we live in a world where critical thinking and analysis is incredibly necessary when you see people like former President Donald Trump spreading misinformation about the US 2020 election, when you see anti-vax propaganda being spread online, when you see flat earth conspiracies taking root across the world. You need analytical skills to find out about the validity of these sources in the first place and whether or not they are true or not. We see this as particularly important due to the harms it has caused many people, such as people that can't get vaccinated. When anti-vax people don't get vaccinated, they're particularly affected by this. Now allow me to start on the mechanization. So first, we say that students will actually have to read and analyze the sources of content to achieve well. We say that you need to read and analyze sources in order to write a strong essay that will actually get you credits, because we say students want to get like at least some level of qualification in order to have a better chance of getting a job for their future. we say students are not so short-sighted as to not care about that, generally speaking. So in order to get these credits, you'll actually have to read. Let's say you want to make a reading response. You'll actually have to read and interpret that book that you're reading. You'll actually have to take a look at the symbolism, take a look at what it's trying to tell you, rather than just inputting it into a website, into ChatGPT to write it for you without any of that analysis. It forces you to actually go through every step of looking at that source, rather than just jumping over it and going from, this is what I want to write, bang, it's done. It requires you to put in that work in the first place. It also means that students will have to, under their side, students will start using it more, which means that they won't have to think for themselves to analyze pieces of writing. They don't have to think about what the symbolism is. Well, like when you watch a show, for example, some things, such as in 1984, the references to it allude to actual political ideologies in our world. If you do not learn your critical thinking and analysis, you don't think about that. You just take it at blanket face value. They don't need. We need people to see the comparisons between real-world figures and not. What are the outcomes of this? Well, first of all, in outside of school, we say that, first of all, without AI, you will be more able to analyze actual false news, see if it is actually true or not. You'll analyze the sources. You'll be able to use your critical thinking and take a step back and see, is this true or not? We say that this means overall there'll be a less belief in extreme conspiracies because people are more likely to critically think about whether or not when Donald Trump says you should inject bleach into your veins, whether or not that is actually true, whether it is helpful or not. We also say that in jobs where you have to critically think, where you have to make those on-the-spot decisions for yourself, that you will be positively benefited by having that critical thinking available to you to make the best decision, rather than having to previously rely on an AI to make all of those decisions for you in the first place. And we say in school, when you try to get into tertiary education, when you're trying to write that master's thesis that will get you finally that highest level of accreditation, AI writing tools can't really do it. So when you're left stranded there after having relied on AI writing in general, you start to feel really pressured, really stressed out, because a thesis, it generally has to be unique, and there's not a lot of theses to draw on for ChatGPT to write a very high quality one. So we say when you don't use AI, that you'll get better outcomes for this because you're less stressed about failing it. You have more experience with writing in general, which means that you're less likely to drop out, which means that we can help solve New Zealand's brain drain specifically, as well as the brain drains of other nations that they are facing, which means we have more qualified workers overall. Now into my second point about how banning AI actually improves learning outcomes. First of all, you have to actually study the content. Right now, under the status quo, I can go into ChatGPT and simply ask it to write a historical essay about Napoleon, and it will come out with something that may or may not be correct, because sometimes it does spew out misinformation and lies. And we say that under our system, you'll actually have to study the information, you'll have to present it in your own manner, you have to actually look at it, collate sources, find out which ones are the most reliable, which ones are not as reliable, and then you have to fact check it all and whatnot. You can't just copy and paste do so. And this applies to other subjects, not just history, like in economics when you have to do writing about it in the first place. This will also apply. In physics, sometimes you do have to do write-ups about specific topics. You'll have to study things for these subjects. So we see this applying to every subject in school, generally speaking. There may be... The second thing is that you have to learn to actually study in the first place. But before I get into this, I'll take a POI if there are any.
Do you recognize that AI are likely to rapidly develop into the future and become more powerful?
As AI becomes more powerful, we see that the negative impacts of you having to learn analytical skills are worse, because when the AI is more powerful, you can learn to rely on it more to do this analysis for you in the first place, which means you aren't actually learning it yourself. Now onto learning to actually study. Students don't actually have to study when you use AI. I don't have to find out about Napoleon to ask ChatGPT to write about him in the first place. When you have to learn, when you have to study, you have to learn how to study in the first place. You have to know, to collate sources, as I stated, to use them effectively. You have to know, specific techniques that may be beneficial to you, may not be, such as rote learning, going over the information over and over again. You learn what works best for you, which is especially good when you're getting into that tertiary region where you have to actually study a lot more to keep up. When you, the step up from secondary to tertiary is quite large, and we want students to actually be equipped to go into that specifically. And my last point is about how teachers and the government will know more about student capabilities. They will know more about what students can do, because they have actual references to go off of in the first place. They can see what they've done. The outcome of this You know how to study effectively, and in jobs, you know, the theory, my second speaker will go into the outcomes of this.
I thank the speaker for that speech, and now invite the first speaker on the negating team to present their team's case.
The case brought forward by the affirmative team so far is like terribly anachronistic and short-sighted, and fails to realize like what a huge impact AI is going to have on our society. In this speech, I'm going to begin by giving like a few characterizations, which I think like differ from what the affirmative team has given us at first, about how AI works, what it's likely to look like in the future, and like what our world is likely to look like in the future. And then I'll go through like some rebuttal as to the ideas around like a lack of critical thinking and lack of like learning outcomes when we use AI, but then also talk about how we think those, even if like you don't accept our mechanism, we think those are symmetric. Alright, to begin with, like how does AI actually work? Like what do we think it's looking like in the future? So we think the characterization the affirmative team gave us is like possibly correct for right now, but at the very moment. But we think within like the next 6 months, within the year, like AI is developing rapidly because it's a new field with lots of room for improvement, and it has lots of company backings because it stands to massively increase their profit margins because it's incredibly like more efficient than human labor and human systems. And so it has like a large budget and it has lots of room for improvement. And that's why it's developing incredibly rapidly. So, thank you. What does this actually look like? It means, in the future, AI won't be restricted to not being able to like ever introduce any critical thinking or new information. It means AI will become even harder to detect, even if you accept that it's able to be detected right now. It becomes even harder to detect in the future. It becomes even more powerful and even more difficult to regulate. Okay. How does this affect our world? What does our world look like, 10 years from now, 5 years from now? Workplaces are going to pick up AI and use them as an incredibly powerful tool to boost their profits. This is because AI are incredibly quick, much faster than a human could ever be. They're incredibly cheap, much cheaper than a human should ever be. And they're incredibly reliable. They don't get tired. They don't make mistakes. They don't need sick leave. And so because of this, AI, assuming that... we've shown that AI are going to become more powerful and efficient, more powerful and efficient. And so workplaces are going to pick them up because they propose all of these benefits to them. And so from here, what do we actually see a human's job as being? Well, realistically, a human's job in a workplace is to use these AI. It's to oversee them. It's to make sure they're working properly, possibly to run some maintenance. And then maybe in the short term, before AI reach a point where it's possible, humans are in charge of doing things like research and development, because we don't think AI, maybe AI in the short term unable to make these developments. And then there's manual labor instead of a white collar job. And we think realistically this stays the same under both sides of the houses. We don't think text AI specifically has any effect on this kind of profession. All right, with that in mind, what should the purpose of our school system be? It is to prepare people for the workforce. It's to prepare them to work in this world. And so because of this, especially at a uni level, and so when we see, a tertiary education level, when we see AI being in heavy use at the workforce, we are actively handicapping students from being able to engage in the workforce, being able to access a high paying job, being able to change the world, at the point in time which we don't teach them how to use these incredibly powerful tools. Right. What's the second kind of purpose of schools, which we took the affirming team focused on mainly, is to develop skills. It's to develop critical thinking and analysis. Okay. So in a world where we have AI, we still develop critical thinking and analysis. Why is that? Well, to give an example that's very applicable to us, it'd be at secondary school, we have exams where you're not allowed a computer. When you don't have a computer, it is impossible to use an AI. And so because of that, Like, you are forced to learn in order to pass your exams. You are forced to learn how to think critically, how to analyze an unfamiliar text, to giving, like an English example, how to write an essay about history, to give like an that. And you're unable to do that with like an AI beforehand because you don't know the content of the exam before you sit it. And so, and then we also, sure.
Won't the development of AI just increase human reliance on it?
What's the negative of human reliance on AI? The affirming team has failed to provide like a reason that just reliance is a bad thing. They've told us that reliance might lead to a decrease in critical thinking, but we've just told you why it doesn't. And also, yeah, onto that point about like learning outcomes, we think it doesn't decrease any like learning outcomes because you have exams that are done on paper. You're not allowed a computer, you're not allowed a device, you're not allowed access to the internet, you're not allowed access to like computer programs, and so you are forced to learn this information. It doesn't matter if you got it from an AI because it's just the exact same as a Google search. There's no like difference in like ability to use a tool that is available to you. And so we think students still learn to think critically and analyze. They still learn like just general information, but they're actually prepared for a workforce. Why does that matter? Why is this like changing workforce really matter? So when we have students or like workers who are able to properly use these tools, they're able to efficiently use these tools, we end up with a much better world for people in the workforce. They have to do less work or less menial or manual work because they're now like their job is to oversee a whole like room of AIs rather than having to write these, you know, reports, these things themselves. And so what does this mean? They're able to have like more free time and a higher quality of life while working less. This is like the goal. People like working sucks. You don't want to be sitting there writing essays for like years on end. And so at the point in time which we don't have to do that, people are able to like live their lives and actually do things that they enjoy instead of being stuck doing menial tasks that can be automated and done in like literally tenths of a second by technology we have today, while producing the same amount at a higher quality. Like, this is a better world where people don't have to slave away. And so when the affirmative team fails to prepare students for this world, they like hold them back. They prevent them from accessing like this whole swath of possibilities where they're able to live a better life. All right. Well, like now talking about that, like what if you don't accept any of our stuff about how the workforce is going to become about AI and it's going to become like entirely AI operated? Well, we think actually it's impossible for the affirmative team to ban access because it is like impossible to detect, especially as we told you, AI is going to like continue to become more powerful. And so it becomes increasingly more difficult, nigh impossible to actually detect people using this technology unless you are standing behind their shoulder watching them do it. And so we think it becomes impossible to detect and it becomes impossible to restrict access because students have access and use in the current day things like VPNs. They have access to shells of these AIs, which are like different ways to access them. We're able to like install them on devices, so even without internet access, they're able to use them. And we think like there's, as the industry explodes, because there's so much room for improvement, we see like a huge, like incredibly large range of options, which make it impossible to like actually pin down and stop students from using all of them. And so what does this mean? That even when they're banned, students like really don't develop the critical thinking skills and learning outcomes that the affirming team has proposed that they learn when they're doing like at-home essays and stuff, because they use them anyway. And like they propose that, you know, maybe if they've done an unreasonable amount of work, you'll just pin them on that. But like that is really just unfair to any kind of student who puts like a large amount of work in. And it's like really you're unable to properly pin them down, or they can just be like use their brain before they do it and not decide to write like an entire essay in 30 minutes. Proud to stand.
I thank the speaker for that speech and now invite the second speaker of the affirming team to continue their team's case.
Until app can actually shrug off the harms that we have told you their world would inherently have, they cannot outrun these harms of this world by giving us an airy-fairy, abstract future in which the problems don't exist but the benefits are tenfold. 3 jobs in my speech today. Firstly, I'm going to go through some rebuttal and 3 points of clash. These are AI in the workplace and our future with it as humanity. Secondly, closed book versus essays and human well-being as a result of it. And thirdly, human reliance on AI and the time frames associated with it. Look, throughout the speech I'm going to be giving some comparative, that's my second job, and finally I'm going to be splitting on the well-being of students and how this will be affected by educational reform that will inevitably come under the negating team's world. Look, firstly, some rebuttal. The first point of clash here is about AI in the workplace and AI into the future of humanity. Look, they said AI is inevitably going to be important in the workplace. Therefore, if you don't let students cheat on their exams with it, they're not going to be prepared to use it. Look, right from the start, we told you even on critical thinking alone, we win this when we outweigh the whole point. Look, if people don't know how to think for themselves, if they don't know how to critically analyze sources, that means that no humans are ever going to end up in jobs where they ever need to compare and contrast more than one source of information. We are essentially going to become pretty useless. Look, also, the other thing that we tell you here is that just because we're not letting students cheat on their exams with it, and it is cheating under the status quo, as we know, it's just not banned in a lot of places, what this means is that people are just likely to learn about AI at home, they're likely to look over it in a digital technology class. If they need computer literacy in their immediate future for the job that they're going to or university, they're likely to just A, get this at home, they don't need school to just give it to them, or B, just take a digital media class, take a digital technology class. They are so likely to learn how to do this, and they do not need to be able to cheat on their exams to do this. What we tell you is that the opposing team characterizes these two things and totally misconstrues them, because knowing how to use them in the context of cheating is not knowing how to be using them in the workplace. Right? There are plenty of other really effective ways that you can learn how to actually use AI without also compromising your academic integrity in the short term. Look, secondly, on closed book versus the essay, I'll cover this in my split, but it's really important to note here that this will have huge ramifications on the well-being of students, because the opposing side cannot just simply claim that you will just have a big turning point in the whole of New Zealand education, in the whole of global education, and say that this is not going to have ramifications, have negative effects on students. Look, thirdly, on reliance. We think that this is a horrible characterization when we hear, we don't want to have to work, nobody wants to do this. We tell you that what the opposing team wants, and what humanity wants, is not always in our best interest, right? This is just smoke and mirrors about a world where nobody ever needs a degree, right? So the opposing team's material is all contingent on a world in which we don't need higher education, we don't need a degree, AI does everything. How long will this take, opposition? Until you can give us a time frame, we do not know how long this will take. How long are we willing to waste by removing all of our independent skills that make us human, all these skills that actually make us capable people, on the promise of a future that we're not even sure will ever happen? When legislation slows down the production of AI, when Elon Musk and other ChatGPT creators get together and they go, look, let's have a halt, let's have a pause on the production of AI, we tell you that this future, which the opposing team is trying to promise us, where nobody ever needs a degree, is increasingly unlikely to happen immediately, increasingly unlikely to ever happen. Therefore, this material all falls out of the debate. Look, before I move on to my split, I'll take a point.
Do you recognise that at the point in time at which these AI are enough to pass all the degrees needed for a job, it's able to perform that job?
No, I don't recognise that, because while you can pass a university test, doesn't mean that you can actually do this job. Especially when we see jobs that are working on the front line with other humans, AI just does not have the capabilities to work with these jobs. How can we take something like a lawyer, which requires high abstract critical thinking, as Riley told you with the example about how you cannot pass your masters with an AI, how are you meant to get through the exams to qualify yourself as a lawyer, let alone a career as a lawyer, if you cannot compare and contrast sources yourselves, analyze different laws, find out which is more important, which is more relevant, and use this in the context? We tell you that this is entirely detrimental to all of humanity. Look, so a bit of comparative. On our side, AI is not banned throughout the whole world, right? Just because we're not letting people cheat on their tests with it, doesn't mean that people are like, I don't know what AI is, I'm not going to be prepared to use it in the workplace. There is no magical switch that as soon as you get into the workplace, everything you do will be done with AI. We tell you that this is a huge generational shift, and also there is legislation slowing down the development, the speed at which AI progresses. This is something that is not directly tied to education, and we think when they promise us this future in which we never need to work, humanity never needs to do anything, we keep hearing this promise of a utopia from the opposing side. It does not stand, neither does their material. Look, so a bit of a split. what is the goal of education? It is to qualify students, it is to test their knowledge, make sure that they are actually capable, they know what they're doing before they go into workplace. We tell you no matter how developed AI gets, this is never going to change. You cannot entirely change the goals of the of the education system in a matter of a few years, and if it takes more than a few years to develop this utopia that we're being promised, isn't it not worth protecting our students of today for these next few years, the near future, right? Okay, so you cannot change the main goals of education. It is to make sure that students are qualified and capable. This will not change. There are two main ways to test if a student is qualified or capable. You give them a task to do, they go home and do it, or you sit them in a test in a classroom and they do it in front of you. Okay, two main ways that this manifests in schools as we see it, secondary and tertiary education. There's the essay and there's the closed book test. Okay, we think that the essay is is inherently better for students' well-being than the closed book test. I'll get onto this later, but first it's important to note that ChatGPT would completely invalidate, completely eliminate, and completely make irrelevant the concept of the essay in secondary and tertiary schools. We absolutely cannot stand for this proposal because it would change the education system entirely, it would change the well-being of students, and it would make a worse society for everyone going through these schooling systems now. Okay, what does this mean? Bit of comparative. What does an essay look like? Looks like students going home to write it. When you're in class time and you have the ability to do it, you get help from the teacher, you get help from other students, you can go home, talk to your parents, talk to your siblings, talk to lots of people online, get a good idea about the topic comprehensively, discuss it, use your critical thinking, none of these things you get on the opposing side, and you get to work through this essay on your own time, and you get to cite your sources and learn how to do it, right? Then you go back, you submit the essay, you get your marks, and this mark is a fair and accurate representation of what you can do, not how accurately you can use an AI, which is not even something that the opposing side is able to prove is necessary for the future. Okay, so on the comparative, what does a closed book test like? It looks like studying and cramming. It looks like people staying up really late to try and memorize things the night before a test, and we are not even sure that this memorization is an accurate skill that will be needed in the future, right? We think it's far more important that people get a comprehensive understanding of things, the ability to attack some things at different viewpoints, and you can only get this through the essay. Finally, the closed book test has a huge effect on student well-being because when ChatGPT invalidates the essay in the years leading up to this brave new world that the opposing side has given us, what happens is that suddenly everything you ever learn in your school needs to be validated, needs to be verified and qualified for you to actually leave the school through a closed book test. What this looks like is huge closed book tests that we see already under the status quo, failing to actually produce outcomes for people, failing to actually make sure that people go through high school literate, able to do equations, tell the time, all these basic skills. All of this gets worse under the opposing side's case because they cannot actually prove to us that we are going to get a world very soon in which AI just takes over everything. Stand for side reality, stand for side education, stand for ACT. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that speech, and I just want to take time to remind speakers that it's probably best to whisper on the bench. Sometimes it's a bit hard to hear speakers when you're talking to your teammates at normal volume. But without further ado, I'd like to invite up the second speaker from the negating team to continue their team's case.
I will first begin my speech with a few responses to the affirming team, and then I will further move on to, in my speech, about what are the inequalities in education we see occurring when we make a flimsy attempt to try to restrict and ban AIs in school, and how this impacts the people involved in education. Just a few things to note. The affirming team has really failed to really state or give much of a reason about how this is actually going to be enforceable, how schools are actually going to be able to enforce this ban. The consequences of this, and we contrast this with on our side of the house, how we prove to you that it's actually this ban is unenforceable, and we see it in first speaker because this AI not only is it developing at a rapid pace, every day it gets more and more complex. And it gets harder to discern whether or not that if a student has used this AI to create something, because it creates something more and more unique every time as it develops. but also because of things like, at school it's very easy to get around a ban through uses of VPNs or other networks. They could quite easily, at home, even if it was banned at school, they can still at home work on their project, use ChatGPT to cheat. So you really just, and this leads into the inequalities that are going to be caused in education. I'll accept that point of information.
Won't teachers be able to tell when a student copy-pastes a perfect essay into OneNote at 11:59 p.m?
No, because we see that we don't really see students doing that so much, because look, we live in a realistic world here. Like we're imagining that even high school students, right? I mean, some high school students, we grant that even they have the foresight to be able to understand that looks a bit dodgy. Like, come on, if people are able to cheat, but that doesn't mean that they're doing it in a way that's going to be, necessarily reveal them cheating. They're going to try to hide that cheating. They know the best way to do that is possibly, they could use ChatGPT at home and then have it on a separate document and then slowly copy and paste that in over time. Do it, have it on a separate document, then copy and paste it, even while they're at school. So it's not really going to be something that teachers are actually legitimately going to be able to enforce this ban. So what we're seeing in this world is that this cheating is still happening. So what are the consequences of that? Well, the consequences are inequalities in education. You have the people who are honest, because you're still going to have people who know that they could cheat, but because they are honest, they're going to choose not to cheat, and then they're going to have the people who aren't honest and who are going to be cheating. The consequences this has on honest people in education and in students is that they're going to be at a disadvantage compared to their peers who are cheating, that they know, there are people out there who probably are cheating, but it's impossible to actually tell or not whether or not they're cheating. So what are the impacts of this? If these other people that they're trying to compete against, they're cheating, that's going to leave them, winning scholarships, money, other very prestigious awards, things like that, and it's going to leave these students feeling unmotivated, feeling like, okay, I don't have access to this important tool that can really give me a boost. I still use all my, ideas and critical thinking skills, but because I'm restricted by having to, do menial labour, by, writing things and then researching, collating sources takes longer when compared to these students that have that advantage through cheating. They're going to miss out on these scholarships. They're going to feel unmotivated. They're going to feel like they don't even have a chance, possibly drop out of education altogether, and that's going to have a very detrimental impact on their lives. So that's why we really see negative consequences on those in education who aren't going to cheat, when you're simply just having this unreasonable ban that's actually realistically not enforceable. Now moving on to my first speaker, we've talked about, and something that is quite important is the purpose of education is ultimately prepare people for the workforce. The affirming team have stated that, they're just going to be able to pick this up on the side, on the day off. Just simply through hearing about it, they're going to be able to learn how it works. Well, no, that just means that you're aware of it. Okay, you're aware of things that are happening in the space around the world. That doesn't actually mean you know how to use them. Just like Microsoft spreadsheets, I can know that they exist, and I know that other people use them and can use it to do wonderful work and great, fantastic, things. But if I don't actually spend time working on it, understanding how it works myself, I'm not actually going to be able to utilise it to be successful in my career, and that's going to leave those people at a disadvantage compared to those other ones around the globe who are accepting this inevitable use. It's going to leave people, those kids who are moving into the workforce, at a disadvantage because they're not going to know how to implement them and use this tool when it's quite important to do so. As we've proven, these tools cut down time on menial tasks quite a bit, increase productivity significantly. So we're just really forcing honest people to be left behind in the dust for those who are dishonest, and that is why it only makes sense to try to accept the reality that this tool exists. Much like how we had calculators earlier on in history, there was the idea that we would, well, we're not going to use them because it's, makes people silly. I think, I believe there's a quote from Plato originally, who thought that, when this tool of writing was invented, that somehow people would become stupid and wouldn't be able to remember things as well. So, but we know that's obviously not true. People can remember things just fine. We just do things differently. And actually, writing, of course, is a fundamental basis of human knowledge. So, what we've actually seen is this tool is actually going to allow us to become even smarter, allow us to do even more research. And the use of this tool is actually instrumental in society, and it's even more important to teach our young people and the people going into the workforce to know how to use it. Well, I have just got a bit more time. I'm just going to go back to some nitpicky things where we've heard from the affirmative team, and that's this idea that people can't develop critical thinking skills outside of writing out a really long essay. We don't view that as actual critical thinking, that because ultimately your ideas still come within. You still actually need to have these ideas to ask to AI, to prompt the AI, to actually get the AI to write you something. You're just not having to write the screeds and put in the punctuation and the commas. So in our world, we still see people developing critical thinking skills. Yes, we are as a society more reliant on it. That in itself is not a bad thing. We're reliant on electricity. That's just how the world works. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that speech, and now invite the third speaker of the affirmative team to continue their team's case.
The only claim that the opposition has provided through all of their cases right from first was just simply a world where humans are going to be useless, where AI will somehow have gained morals, the ability to think for itself and do every job on the planet, and where every human somehow has a job supervising these, and that these humans would somehow need high qualifications taught in school through writing technology, AI, that would allow them for everyone to have a job. Finn has already explained why this is unrealistic, but in my speech I will be going more in depth into why this is A, unrealistic, and B, why it actually is harmful even if we take their world at their best case. So we see 3 points of clash so far in this debate. Firstly, on what the world actually looks like. This is basically what I've just explained, but I'll go a little bit more in depth here. Secondly, in the workplace, here I'll explain why we actually still benefit even in their model of the workplace. And thirdly, on how it will be used in schools, how it will be enforced, and what will be taught in schools. So moving on into the first point of clash here, just a little bit of comparing worlds, right? We see that it's actually highly unlikely that AI is going to develop at such a fast rate that within 6 months to a year, as they give us a timeline, it will have developed so exponentially that everyone will be able to implement it into their own workplaces, that it will be able to every job on the globe, that no student anywhere will need analyzing and critical thinking skills, which can only be taught on our side of the house. And we just see this as being highly unrealistic. What do we see on our side? We see that at the very least, for quite a few years, we still need students to be having the ability to think critically, to ask questions, and to write paragraphs and analyze sources from different places. We see this as being hugely important, even in their case. So then, secondly, moving on to the workplace. What they've told us here, in this point of clash, is that it'll somehow be able to be done very quickly. I've just addressed this. But secondly, the AI is faster, cheaper, more reliable than humans, and it will be humans' job to just oversee. Firstly, we tell you that these are skills humans only have. AI is not able to assess morals, reliability, able to pull from different sources and actually analyze which one is the most reliable or create new ideas. They've tried to tell us that it will somehow be able to, but they have not actually given a clear case on this. It's been very fuzzy, and we see that just realistically it cannot, because it draws on sources that are already in the world. If it's somehow able to create new ideas, we needed an example of how it will do this from first, or else their world simply cannot stand. Secondly on this, we see that if we take their job that humans will just oversee, right, they then take away all of the skills that give humans value to a company. They've just told us that humans will have no value because AI is somehow able to do everything better. This is hugely harmful. Why is it harmful in their world? They told us at their first that humans would likely just be able to do things like manual labor in spaces where possibly AI cannot, but then they proceeded to go on and say that they would actually just be overseeing because it can do manual labor. This is firstly an internal tension, but secondly, not realistic, right? How many overseeing jobs are there? We do not see many jobs for overseeing like large company AI, right? This is effectively a manager. There are far less managers in the world than workers. So what does this look like? And this looks like the majority of people not being able to get a job if we take their world at best, which, just to reiterate, we do not think is realistic. But if we take their world at best, people are not able to get jobs, right? This leads people to having economic strife, depression, isolation from no social aspects because they don't have a workplace, because all of these jobs are suddenly able to be completed by AI. People no longer have any aspects that cannot be done by AI on their side of the house because they learn none of this in school. The next thing they told us here is that students just won't have the tools, and so they won't be able to get a job if they're not able to use writing AI technology in schools. Firstly, not many skills are needed to use general AI, right? So not much will be gained from using it in schools. They gave us no specific examples of why writing AI technology in schools will help people to get this level of understanding, right? Because we see that currently there's actually a degree for this, right, computer science or computer engineering. This is what these overseers would actually need to do the maintenance. So this is just really not that impactful in this debate. Then their most recent speaker brought up a little bit of a split and a little bit of more analysis on a global workforce differing, all of this sort of stuff. Firstly here, we tell you that we support a ban on AI anywhere in the world, anywhere, so we do not see a huge diaspora. And secondly, we tell you that we support banning it because people and states who ban it will actually have students and people who are better off, who are able to do jobs that AI cannot, at the very, very least in our worst case, for the near future, where their world just cannot stand. And sorry, yes, I will take POI now.
Do you recognise that if an AI is unable to do a job, then a student will be unable to use it to get the degree to do that job?
Okay, well what we see here is that if an AI is able to do a job, right, humans still have other aspects that they are required to have, right, that give them a special value, and this is what we support on our side of the house. I'm actually about to go into this on an education, how it impacts them. Thank you for that. So the second point of clash here is just how will it be used in schools? Will it be able to be used effectively? What will students learn? All of this. We've told you from first, the key benefits are that we provide people with an education where they actually retain the knowledge that they can use in specific industries, which AI cannot do. Specifically, we gave you examples of lawyers, doctors, and people in industries where they have to work socially, which AI cannot do because it is not a person. Then also gave you a split on mental health. Okay, so moving into their first point here about how exams will still give people the critical thinking. This has been their main push on still keeping humans, giving some value. We see that firstly, students just kind of won't bother to show up for these exams, right? We already see people not bothering to show up because in school, you don't always have to go to your end of year exams to do it. So what does this look like? It looks like huge gaps in knowledge. Even if it's only a small percentage of those students not showing up to those exams, they now do not learn in class. They do not retain the knowledge that they learn in class. They don't bother studying for their exams because they have no reason to on their side of the world. And then students learn effectively nothing. They come out of school with no critical thinking ability, no ability to actually retain knowledge, and no knowledge of the real world. We also pushed you hard here on how this impacts people in the real world outside of education with misinformation, which has not been addressed on their side of the house. The next thing that they tried to tell us here is that on our side, it's just simply impossible to ban AI or detect it in the future or restrict it and all of this. We've given you mechanisms on this from first, but let's just go over them again, right? We saw AI checkers also improving at the same rate, right? The AI all improves at the same rate, so we see this still standing. Secondly, we told you at Finn and at Riley a little bit as well, right? That the pace of writing and the pace of production is important. What does this look like? I'll clarify it a little bit because I feel like it's been a bit lost, right? We see that teachers are able to go into a OneNote, a Google Doc, a Microsoft Word doc, whatever, right? They're able to go and they're able to look at stuff from the past week, the past month, whatever. And we see that often it's not one document, right? When you do an assessment, you have to analyze sources. You have to get different sources from different places and analyze them. We see this as being the largest part of an assessment. So this also rebuts the point that they brought up about how students will just paste it in slowly, right? Why is this? It's because your research on sourcing material and like analyzing sources and how reliable they are, especially at uni as well, is a huge part of your grade. So if students do not have any of this, they just have the pasted in knowledge going down, it's still not going to help them. They're not likely to do this. They still have to have some form of sourcing, and therefore this part of their case also falls apart. But our case still stands. We still provide people with the best education, the best ability to know about misinformation, all of this. And this is just like hugely important in this debate. Just to finally sum up a little bit more, right? They told us about like inequalities, awards, all of this. Firstly, we see this as not being hugely important. But secondly, right, it's especially true at this level, this material that I've just given you, right? There's so many factors that go into deciding who wins awards, who wins scholarships, right? And a lot of this is looking at more than just a grade. They actually go and they read your work. They look at where you got it. They look at your sources. They look at your extracurriculars, right? This just falls out of debate. This is not relevant. So what do we have on their side? We have an unrealistic world, which will probably not come about anyway. I've already given you the harms on realism, people going into economic strife, but on our side we provide people with value even in their model, but more importantly we give them the ability to succeed in the real world. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that speech, and now for the final substantive speech of the debate, I invite the third negative speaker to give his team's case.
In this debate, there's been three clashes. The first of which would be, what is school for? And the description of how the future is going to be with ChatGPT and other AIs. Now, what is school for? School is made to prepare you for life. School gives you the skills and the rational thinking skills to prepare you to go into the workforce or go into tertiary education where you can go further and then enter the workforce. So in reality, we see that school is designed to help you get a job, get a career, and have a good life. Now, with that being said, how is the workforce going to look in the future? Well, as we said, we believe that the future's workplace is going to implement lots of AI technologies, where the AI is working, where we use AI hand in hand with people to complete our tasks and do our jobs. Now, I'm exactly explaining some of the mechanisms exactly why we would see AI in workplaces. Well, firstly, the affirming team has said something about AI simply not going to get good enough to be used in these workplaces. I simply just think this is untrue, as there's an incentive for the companies making these AIs to make better and better AIs that write more and more like humans, and have more and more rational thinking skills, and use better and better sources. Now, as these AIs will get better, as there's an incentive for these companies to make these better AIs, we will see companies start to use these AIs in their workforce simply because AIs will make the task a lot faster. You don't have to pay a person 8 hours to create a 3,000 word report about this small menial thing. This isn't hard work, this is just lots of writing, which an AI can do instantly. So because a company wants to cut costs and increase efficiencies, they will try to use AIs with the people. So, as we just say that these AIs will be involved in the future workplace, it is important to show students how to use AI properly and how they can use AI to benefit them for the future. And that is what we're preparing them for. And by proving this, we have won this debate on that clash point. Now, the second clash was, are these students going to have these rational thinking skills? The affirming team has brought up points saying because these students were just using AI, we will have no rational thinking skills and we will simply be dumb. I think this is a gross exaggeration of how it will actually pan out. So, under the status quo, we see schools implementing class time, while students working in class with their teacher, where they can't have computers or phones out. They're simply working with a pen and a piece of paper. Now, what does this entail? It means they can't use AI in class when the teacher's teaching them. Now, what does this mean for the students in these classes? Well, it means when they have to do maybe practice tests or actual tests in class that take a day, and they can't use computers or AIs, they still have to practice. They still have to use their thinking skills. When they're working the class and doing the test for that class, they are still thinking. We're not going to be you're not going to stay home and just go on your computer and use an AI and do the entire. You have to show up to class, otherwise you won't graduate school. Now, affirming also disregards anything that. So, another thing we have to think about is if an AI can realistically do this work, is it really important that the students know how to do this? If an AI in the future can do these large tasks instantly, what's the point in learning them for ourselves? No, thank you. When we invented the calculator and everyone started using it, what's the point of knowing how to do these massive calculations by hand? It's slower, less efficient, and you never see it in the workplace. We will simply use these technologies in the workplace because they are better. So what's the point in going through all that time, all that struggle to learn how to do this and also how to, and actually just doing this all together? It's just a waste of time, it's a waste of energy, and there's no point that students should work on this when it can be instantly done by a computer. Now, they also said that because AI simply repeats the things it sees, you will simply have no new content, no new ideas, no new inventions, nothing. Again, I think this is ridiculous because students are doing stuff in class, they are still doing practical things, they are not mindless zombies just using ChatGPT and other AIs for everything. And that is why we won this class, because we've proven that either these students are going to have the skills required to do their work in the future. Now, for a third clash, it's really No, thank you. It's about implementation of the ban that the affirming team has tried to put. Now, it is very difficult to get. Now, unis don't really have class time like they do in secondary schools. They have lectures. Now, in a lecture, you're sitting in a room while a professor or another person knowledgeable in the subject speaks about the topic, teaching the class. And then might be assigned assignment, and you'll have to work on it at home. How do they expect these students not to use ChatGPT, something that can create these excellent level assignments instantly? Now, so we would see widespread cheating in unis, and this would be a massive issue because those students who aren't cheating would then will then be pushed behind. They'll be struggling. It'll be unfair towards them because they'll have to go through the work themselves. While other students are just coasting, not doing any of the work, and using ChatGPT for everything. If we allow ChatGPT to be used in unis and we focus the curriculum more on things that don't heavily rely on just making assignments, having these massive reports done that can be done by AI instantly, we will see. Sure, go ahead.
How disruptive would it be to redo an entire curriculum based around the use of ChatGPT?
We're not saying we got to rewrite the entire curriculum. We weren't suggesting that at all. We're just saying we see more work focused on building rational skills that are going to be used by the employers in the future, while still knowing how to use these AIs, but not having the entire curriculum focused around these AIs. And that's that can be done by AIs instantly. Because there's more to work than just making giant reports. Right? There's more to work than figuring out the historical influence of, making a report on 1987. There's more to work than that, and that's more things you learn in uni that doesn't get covered by that. Now, along with this, AIs are going to get better and better and harder to detect. Now, as AIs develop, and like we said, these companies have incentive to develop these AIs, they will get closer and closer to how humans write. They're going to get more and more like us in the way we think, in the way we write, in the way we review sources. Now this means that AI checkers, like they said, it's going to get harder and harder and harder for them to detect and distinguish it between normal person writing and a computer writing. And instead of going through all that hassle, we could just simply allow people to use these AI technology, and we wouldn't have to worry about if the AI checker is effective or not. Now, and because of this, because we've shown that we're preparing students for the workforce, and this is a good thing because we want to make sure the students are prepared so they can get a job and be competitive, this is why the negating team has won this debate. Thank you very much.
I thank the speaker for that speech. And now we reverse the order and hear from the negating team's leader.
The affirmative team has provided like a single substantive push within this debate, and that is that we see a loss in critical thinking skills and learning outcomes for students. Okay, like when they're using like AI to write their assignments and essays. Alright, we told you at first why they're going to like face this under both sides of the house, and why also we don't think like you actually see this negative all that much at all. Alright. They failed to properly defend their case when we told them that it would, happen under that side of the house and they were going to be unable to detect AI. They told us that like there are things like AI checkers and there are things like, pasting an entire essay straight into a document like seconds before the due date. We think students aren't that stupid because they have an incentive not to be caught. And B, like the incentives of these AI development companies are to make them more like human, like we told you at first and like we told you at third. And so it's going to become increasingly difficult for these AI checkers to detect them, and they can provide no mechanism as to how these AI checkers are being funded and developed. Whereas we told you at first that there is like large economic incentives for very big companies to invest in the development of AI, and so we can see that they are very likely to develop quickly, and so they are going to be undetectable and unrestrictable, and we're going to see them being used under both sides of the house. There, now comes so at this point in the debate, the debate is a wash, but it's the exact same under both sides. Both sides, students are using AI, but we told you at our second speaker, our smaller substantive push, which was that, we see inequality when you have students who are willing to cheat and students who aren't, and that is not fair on the students. We have seen no adequate response from the affirming team, because it is irrefutable that if, children are using these AI, then there will be people who are unwilling to cheat, and so they are left behind and unfairly discriminated against. And so we win this debate at this point, but still we have our largest substantive push, which is that AI is going to become a huge thing in the workplace. There is no real refutation from the affirming team. We told you it is way more efficient, way more reliable, and way quicker, and so there is no reason for no real reason for these companies not to use AI technology. And so, with this in mind, we tell you that there is no reason that that these students should be prepared to use these tools when they go into the workforce, because that is what they're going to be doing in the workforce. We see no refutation from the affirming team. We have clearly won this debate by a huge margin when we win both our our large substantive push and our split point. Okay, what does our world actually look like though? We see people aren't stuck working 9 to 5 for 60 years of their life. They're able to enjoy their life. They're able to do things outside of their job. They're able to have more free time, a better quality of life when they're not stuck doing menial work for hours on end every single week. And we see the same production within our society, because these all this work that has been taken off humans is now shifted to AI, who are able to do it more efficiently, more effectively, and more reliably. We see a much better world at the point in time in which people aren't slaving away their lives merely to make a living. Thank you.
I thank the speaker for that speech. And now for the final speech of the debate, we hear from the affirming team's leader.
Interesting tactic, interesting debate from Nick today. What we saw is this essential push where they blur their outcomes and zoom them in so far into the future that they forget to show us how we actually get to them and how they alone get to them. 3 points of clash today. Firstly, can teachers check for AI content? Secondly, what role does AI have to play in our future? And finally, what is the effect on students? First point of clash. They said, look, can teachers check for AI content? No, because we'll get huge, mega, super future AI which will never ever be caught. It just can't be. We said, here in the real world, AI checker alone stops this. Even if you don't buy this fact because AI is developing, we tell you that AI checker, as an AI itself, is also developing. Even if you don't buy this, we gave you 3 other ways that a teacher alone, let alone a school or like a serious like fraud or ethics like committee, is able to check this. We told you that teachers are able to just check because they know it's like pretty obvious when a student that they are teaching themselves hasn't actually written the content. They know because it's being pasted in really quickly at the end of the night just before the due date. They know when they can just talk to the student and be like, hey, what do you know about this subject? And if the student doesn't know anything because they use AI, they just be like, okay, I don't know this topic. So therefore, we win this point when they absolutely cannot prove that teachers are unable to check the AI content, which their entire case is contingent on. They kept saying that it can be circumvented, right? And that this would apparently look like paraphrasing what an AI has said, copy-pasting it slowly, analysing each word, each sentence before you put it in. Unfortunately, for Neg, this just looks an awful lot like writing an essay. Next point of clash, is AI in the future, what role does it have to play? Look, we said that there are other sources than cheating to know about AI, because AI will inevitably have something to do with humanity in the future. What we heard from them is that knowing about it doesn't mean knowing how to use it. Unfortunately for them, we said cheating with it doesn't actually mean knowing how to use it either. Learning how it works, which they've seemed to prioritise, is absolutely not something that you learn when you just type in the words to an AI, can you write an essay for me about 1984. Even if you buy that like this is the only way that you will ever be exposed to AI and the only way you'll ever learn about it, there are ways that do not cause harms, and this is a key difference to our side that you don't get these benefits, you do get these harms. Look, writing AI can fundamentally never take that many jobs. We see this when they promise us this future because we're banning, and which we don't get apparently because we are banning AI in schools. We're talking about writing AI here. Like, you can never take so many jobs with just ChatGPT. It is literally just like a fill in the blank of the sentence AI on a huge scale. That is genuinely how it works. There is absolutely no way that you'll take the entire human job force with a fill in the blanks machine. Okay, final point of clash, which is the effect on students. They said that students are going to benefit massively from this because once they leave school, they're never going to have to work ever because they will not need a job. Look, we said obviously this has huge realistic harms. More importantly, my split went unresponded to about student well-being. We also heard points from Riley about misinformation and what it means when they cannot verify information for themselves. We also heard what it means when students do not have the ability to communicate with others, when they do not have the ability to write, when they do not have the ability to research. Doesn't matter, as according to their split, who is willing to cheat and who isn't when nobody is able to. Blanket rule. We told you right in my first point of clash, why a teacher, like a teacher alone, let alone the other resources that we have, will always beat that. Look, if we get to utopia, then so be it. But the barrier to utopia, the reason we don't see it right now, is not because school won't let you cheat on your essays. Come on, there are no unique benefits to your side. The outcomes have become this utopia magic world. We heard the end of how we get there, but even if we buy this, we don't hear why that's unique to your side, why we don't get it. I'm going to end with a quote, because I think it was Plato who said, "Mega uber future super AI doesn't solve society, doesn't rescue humanity, and doesn't win debate."
I thank both teams for a fantastic debate. I now invite both teams to cross the floor and shake hands, and all of us to vacate the room.
Also, if anyone has a ballpoint, I
Sorry,
just to fill in the
yellow
be
bit.
much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I forget to bring them.